Welcome to Dialogue, a podcast where we unravel the threads of technology that are shaping the future of our world. We discuss technology and software both on high level and under the hood.
My name is Lauri and I'm the CTO at Finitech, the leading freelancer tech talent agency in Finland. And I'm your host on Dialogue, where I'm interviewing top professionals in their fields, so as a software expert, you might not want to miss this. Today we're talking with Varya Stepanova. She's a design system architect who's been working on design systems for several years, helping organizations to bridge technology and design. And she's worked with companies such as Elisa, a Finnish telecom company, and Metro Digital, a large German retail company, to build successful design systems. Welcome to Dialogue, Varya.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here. Let's have a nice conversation.
And the topic today is an interesting one. At least personally, I'm excited about this. So we're talking about design systems reversive analysis. And benchmarking is one recommended practice when you're looking for what could be the next steps for your design system. But, you know, there's so many design systems and they are very different. So it might be confusing what standard to benchmark with. And Varya's been doing a lot of studying around this. She studied dozens of design systems and committed reversive analysis, which we'll hear about today, on their features and attributes. And she'll be guiding us through the methodology and the results that can help make strategic product decisions and suggested specific implementation approaches for teams. So I'm interested to know, what is the reversive analysis of design systems?
Basically, is that, as you correctly pointed out, it is benchmarking. We can look around and see what others have done with their design systems. Luckily, many of them are open sourced, and that means that we can not only see the result, but also dive deeply into the implementation and see how exactly this result was achieved. But all this knowledge is very fragmented here and there across the net. So the reverse analysis helps to bring the knowledge together and have another look at that when everything is systematically presented.
All right. Well, I forgot one thing, that to like frame the topic a little bit, because we're talking about design systems. So could you give like a short introduction to somebody who does not know what a design system is? How would you describe that in a few words?
That's a tough question because many people really understand very different things when they are saying design system. So if we are very widely speaking, it is a systematic approach for design and development of the interfaces. But what it practically ends up in different companies, that may vary. So some say that libraries of components on the web are the most crucial parts of design systems. Some outline the design libraries in Figma or Sketch. Some highlight the processes between design and development, how the design idea is transitioned to the implementation and then to the end customer. So it's up to you what is the design system, but it definitely somehow bridges design and development.
Okay, well that's a good answer in terms of now the audience should know what we're talking about, and they can obviously there can be many opinions, as you said, about what is the design system, but maybe the context is now clear. Can you talk a little bit about the background, how you came to the conclusion that this method like reversive analysis is a solid approach to first of all, like benchmarking and figuring out what you need to do in terms of making your design system better?
Yeah, sure. First of all, benchmarking is a known method in development. Often happens when we want to implement something, or maybe the most relevant example is if we are choosing the tool to achieve something, and there is a selection of tools, then we approach benchmarking to make an informed decision. But also there is another aspect that I met during my studies at the university. I studied international design business management, and we did real design projects. And there I got to know that in the design project, there are such things as industry research. Basically, not only the customer needs are researched, but the landscape in the industry, what are the existing solutions, or what are the solutions anyhow close to the idea that we would like to approach. And I somehow combined it all together and got to the conclusion that it must be applied to making or enhancing design systems if we consider a design system as a product.
All right. So what would be like when you're benchmarking different design systems? What would be your recommended set of metrics or characteristics that you'd want to see, or you look for in the analysis to like determine where your own design system is and where it should transition to?
My main problem was that even though the knowledge about how to approach different problems exists, it's very much fragmented. There is a lot of resources that list successful design systems, and you can even select them by technology so that you only focus on what applies to your specific situation. But even with the help of such a list, you have to have a look at every single design system, or perhaps at every single component there, and get a small piece of knowledge that you would later use. I wasn't happy with that situation, and specifically when I needed to transfer this knowledge to other people, because yes, I can from day to day I can study the design systems and gain this knowledge, but how do I communicate it to someone else who probably doesn't have that much time? And I decided that I need something that puts together, and it has a visual representation. Also because I think for other people it would be easier to consume the information if it's somehow visually presented. And especially if we are speaking not only to developers, but to designers or business people. And I personally worked in Miro, but any other tool would apply. So I tried to design a wireframe of an imaginary design system, how it would look. It is a website that has a header, has a sidebar, the main area, and there is some information presented there. And when I studied different design systems, I noted some specific small things that can be applied to others, and put references to them onto this imaginary design system. For example, that imaginary page has a badge that signals that the component that it describes is experimental. This was borrowed from some design system. And so on, feature by feature, very small details put together with some visual representation and references. And that gave me kind of, maybe we can call it a map. So the whole picture that is easy to pass to another person, because in my case, it's basically a mirror board, or it can be some drawing in Figma or some schema. And with the team, if we want to decide specifics to discuss with the team, if we want to discuss specific solution, it's much easier to have this as a reference.
Okay, so what they are they? If you think of the mention, you mentioned the word map. Are there any specific? If you can relate to that, for example, a world map, would there be like what would be the continents, like the areas that you'd put on the map? Are there any particular areas? If I would be doing a reversive analysis on my own design system, wherever that might be, what would be like the main topics that I should cover?
My approach comes from practical to general. So when outlining this imaginary page, I try to fill it with information which could be real. So what if it was my design system, its website, what could I see there? Well, maybe there are some documentation pages, right? How to get started, the changelog as a page, then the list of components, a separate page for accessibility guidelines. And when I came to examining the design systems, if I saw something missing that I haven't outlined in my wireframe, I added it there. And through a while, I had more complete wireframe with all the references.
All right. So, who would you recommend that are involved in doing the analysis of the design, the reversive analysis? Is it something that can be done by, let's say, a design system architect, or would you want whom would you should be involved in doing the analysis and benchmarking?
I think the most interested person would be a project manager for the design system, if there is any. Or sometimes it's combined role, like lead designer or lead developer. They play the role of design system project manager. Then probably the people who are doing design systems hands-on, the very designers and developers, because often happens that you need some expertise to see if the offered solution is good enough. Yeah, and you can also approach me because I have already done it. I can share the link with you.
But generally, it's something that you don't necessarily need the whole team to participate in a sense that if you want to do work on the design system, like this kind of a research and development future, you don't have to kind of drop gloves from all the participants and just focus on doing the reverse analysis. But a few key people can put together a good analysis and benchmarks, and then as a team, then you can review that. Is that kind of the general gist of it?
Yeah, sure. Well, there is a lot of manual work in this thing, like to bring all the references, organize it somehow nicely. For that work, you could ask someone who is the most motivated to do that. For example, an intern whom you are interested to educate on the design systems. But at the point then this manual work is done, you can link all the team members to finalize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are the main findings that usually come up through the analysis? So are there development areas or specific actions, or what are the outcomes that people can expect when they do this, or what they should be aiming at?
I'm trying to match the map that I have with the problems that we are facing on real projects, so that I'm trying to guess what is the problem behind the solution in the specific design system. And if we have similar problem, then maybe we have to try the same solution.
Right, so it's like pulling different kinds of solution that already work somewhere else and trying to identify your own problems if they map to that same solution framework, and then update. Yeah, well, that makes sense. What if I have some particularly unique problems? I know the universe of unique problems might not be too big, that I might just simply think that I have a unique problem, but they actually somebody already has tackled the same kind of problem before, and maybe even has a workable or suitable solution that I can emulate or implement. But what if the team gets stuck in a sense that they can't find a good benchmark? What would you recommend they do?
Actually, such problems are not so unique as you are not so rare if you
Okay.
as you can imagine, because even if you get the idea how exactly you can overcome the problem, it usually happens that the specific implementation doesn't match your code base or your specific design environment, and you can only borrow the idea, not the implementation.
Right. Yeah.
But sometimes you can see the references in code too, thanks to the fact that many design systems are open sourced. And I usually prefer studying open source design systems because I believe in open source as an idea.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant. Not the implementation, that the kind of the idea, but open source design systems are actually really good resource in the sense that you get to see how people implemented the solution, and then you can draw inferences from that, whether it's directly applicable to your problem or not. All right, so if I've got, let's say I've mapped the problems or identified the problems that I have in my design system, and now I want to try to solve them. Do you have any specific examples on how I would approach that, maybe from the technology side, or however you see fit?
Yes, sure. So how I initially built the map that I call complete design system, and how what I usually use in also day-to-day development of the component is that I go to a catalog of design systems or catalog of components. The best that I prefer is component.gallery. This is the website. And apparently it has filters so that you can select only the open source design systems, or you can select design systems implemented in a specific technology using a specific framework. That way you can narrow down the field of research so that it is more applicable to you. And what I like also is that, particularly at this website, you can find the components too, not only the list of design systems, but say all the buttons implemented in web components and that are open sourced. This way you can study 3 to 5 examples and gain enough knowledge to make your own.
Yeah, and you can probably even pull some of the examples into your prototyping and see how they fit into your application right away. So that might be a good way to experiment on whether the idea itself, whether you think that it will solve the problem or help you elevate the standard of your design system in that particular area.
Where the result of reverse analysis can help. For example, it's often a problem to involve contributors to the design system so that it worked as an in-house open source solution, and developers and designers brought pieces of their work into a design system so that the whole company could benefit from their work too. And this is something that every company faces, and many want a solution to that. Having a look at the resultant map, we can see what others have done to encourage their colleagues to contribute to the design system. For example, in my particular imaginary page, I picked from different design systems that they may have a list of contributors at every single component, so that the people who ever fixed a bug in this specific component, they got praised a bit for that. Their contribution has been recognized and forever stamped at the documentation page that they also touched it. And as I can guess, this contributes into shared ownership of the design system, and this is something that many companies would love to achieve. Another example could be component-specific changelog, also picked up by from several design systems as an example, and it matches to the complaints of the design system users who sometimes say about the lack of information. And providing changelog for a specific component, you're somehow solving a bit this problem and respond to this complaint. And we can have like many examples like that. These are all really small things, but you can see that behind all these small things, there were real business problems.
Well, we did discuss the open source, and you said you were a huge proponent of open source software and systems and components likewise here. Do you recommend that companies open source their design systems, and how they should go about it, and how do you get the community once you maybe get, if you do the if you open source the design systems, you get some people actually using that are outside of your company? How do you, is it the same methods that you use for internal engagement and encouraging to contribute? Do they work in the open source realm as well, or are there any specific recommendations that you have?
Yeah, I do recommend to open source the design systems if there is a possibility. for several reasons. The main practical reason is that in this case, you do not limit the stakeholders to internal people only. It often happens that a company hires a design agency or some external people to complete a piece of work. And if they have design system as a guideline or even as artifact to reuse, it is much better. And with open source design systems, it's available to anyone. But most likely, people who are not involved in the company products, they are not going to use it directly because no one needs someone else's design system for practical reasons. Yeah, but you may have counter agents who will need to use it to align with your company brand. So that's one reason. Another reason is a bit psychological, is that when we are open sourcing, we are raising a bar of expectations for ourselves. So a bit of shame-driven design and development, but we will work better knowing that anyone can see. It's same as inviting guests to your house. It's I don't know how for you and for listeners, but mine looks much better when someone comes. So then it's good. And the third reason is the possibility to use open tools, to use public tools. For example, at one design system, we wanted to distribute a standalone build for a web component library, but that design system was closed sourced. And due to some technical reasons, the DevOps department couldn't offer the solution for hosting the builds. Whereas it would be much easier to open source the design system and use public npm.js as a CDN to distribute that builds. So, and particularly in that case, for this practical reason, the company did open source the library.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. A lot of good reasons why companies should consider open sourcing their design systems. Are there any? I can think of like maybe that's like almost like a opposite of the shame-driven development. By if you open source, you might be able to build some good social capital out of it, like people, because people can learn from your stuff that you've done. Maybe you've got some unique or new problem, new solutions to or approaches to problems that other people have faced already or are facing currently. So in that sense, that might also be beneficial as a positive thing of open source.
Yeah, that's an example of positive thinking. Yeah, that's true. So like, if people see what you're working on, they may approach you with not necessarily their problems or solutions for you, but just to connect. And maybe in the future you would collaborate on something. Also, while you were speaking about that aspect, I got thinking about gamification. Like GitHub has all these charts on how many times you have committed. And definitely, if the products are open source, then this history is visible to everyone, and it's also an achievement.
Yeah, if you are actively working on it and improving it and making it even better than it is already, so that might be also a sign for anybody who's looking for an example design system that they should follow or admire or use as a benchmark. If it gets regular updates all the time, you builds confidence in you to trust that these guys are investing all the time into researching new ways of solving the design problems, and why might want to follow that, or even start implementing some of the ideas that they have published in your own design systems. So I think that might be a good also motivator for a company to consider open sourcing if there are no there are probably business constraints usually that might end up having the people go about the closed source route. But or what's your opinion? Are the reasons usually valid, or are there simply just some assumptions that once challenged, they come up to a different conclusion?
Well, I think in most cases, it's the question of resources that we can apply, because even if we have some business sensitive information, because of which we cannot open source, it would still theoretically be possible to split and keep the business sensitive part still closed source and open source the rest. But it always means that you need to apply mostly development resources into that.
Yeah. Well, we did talk about benchmarking. How about? I mean, that's like a good way of. Would you recommend that for everybody, or would there be cases where people should maybe look a little bit beyond it? I've heard this one line saying that don't benchmark but future mark. So that you should not try to copy what for others are already like standard practices. For you, they might be best practices, but others, they are standard practices. And if you're, well, this applies maybe only if you're in a competitive environment, when you're competing against other companies or entities who build similar products or services, and where you ideally want to be pushing the boundary also a little bit, not just trying to catch up. But there might be also situations where you're not able to do that at the moment. So do you have any advice for let's say each of a group, one who wants to get up on par with the competition or with the industry, and one who is looking to maybe push the boundary of the design frontier?
Yeah, I like the term future mark. Going to use it from now on. Yeah, and it indeed, at least for me, would be more interesting to do something unique and approach the problem that no one have ever solved, at least yet. Yeah, but what I saw often happens that there is a lack of resources, and the usually small design system team just cannot invest that much time and resources into what we usually call research and development. And in these cases, it's just the only way to go on the easier path when you are trying to grab a solution that have proved themselves already, apply to your situation, and hope that business can recognize the value of design system as a product, so that you get more resources and permission to be more innovative on your product. But also, I must say that as we already discussed, it rarely happens that a specific solution can be applied without any adjustment. Usually what you can grab from the others is just an idea or proof of concept for implementation. And given the own legacy of every company and every design system, there is still room for innovation, even if you are trying to do something that others have already done.
Yeah, right. So it's more like raising the baseline with the standard practices, and then you kind of have to always future mark or always innovate a little bit of that. So it's not just like copying others to raise to the same level, but you're probably right that there's also obviously context specific constraints and issues and characteristics that always require a little bit of synthesis and new thinking. You can stand on the shoulders of giants by looking at others and then building it on top of that. So what do you think?
Yeah, indeed. And what I also got thinking regarding your question is that even if you do completely innovative work, that method of reverse analysis can still help. Because besides the specific solutions, you may also guess or research what were the problems behind these solutions. And then you can make the match on the problem level and see if it's anyhow similar to what you are on right now. And then you can see what is already available as a response to this particular problem. And you can be innovative using this benchmark as something that you are definitely not doing. So you are doing something else as a response to the very same problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the product decisions that you might get out of those the analysis. What based on your experience and application of the method, what do you see as the most, let's say, common and impactful insights or changes that people draw from the analysis and make on their business or like the design system work? What are usually if you had to pick like top 3, or there could be more, but what would you think are the important things that usually surface?
Maybe the biggest outcome for me personally was that the list of components and documentation for the components is not the largest and is not the most important part in the design systems that I studied. So a lot of meta information, like documentation about how to get started, how to contribute, or accessibility guidelines, they play significant role, which is sometimes not understood from very beginning. But apparently, looking at what others have done, I have seen, judging by the result, how much resources were invested into that. And I understood that as a manager in a design system project, I should consider this as a huge piece of work too.
Yeah, so it kind of helps you right-size the investment and maybe prioritize the things that you might want to work on regarding the product regarding its
this
goals
thing,
and so forth. So
depending on how the work in the company is organized, perhaps it can even result in the different OKRs and KPIs. Previously, the management was most interested in having more and more components for the design system. But looking around and seeing what others are doing, you may notice that the quality of design system for the others is also being accessible enough or having enough contributions. And you may borrow this as an idea of what is your goal for the next 3-6 months.
yeah, so it kind of helps you learn what you don't know or what you should consider. Kind of gives a little bit more breadth to the whole design system and how what are the critical components that you should in terms of the design system, what you should have and areas that you should invest in. So yeah, I think that kind of helps you then prioritize where to assign the human capital and money also if we're going forward. Well, we did mention in the beginning that we would talk a little bit about the specific implementation approaches. Are there any specific ones that you'd wish to share with the audience?
While examining that many design systems, I got also a lot of knowledge on what tools were used. And now I even can at first glance to see if they are hosting the documentation at some cloud or what exactly is the framework they are using for their custom-made documentation and so on. I wouldn't recommend anything specific, like proposing a specific tool or recommending build on your own using specific framework, because also one of the things that I've noticed in this analysis is that there is no leader. So it is not that there is some framework where that like 90 design system documentations are 90% of design system documentations are built on that. It's not like that. There are, say, 4 solutions and 20% on one solution, 25 on another solution, and so on and so on. Maybe if a team or design system faces the choice so that they haven't done the decision yet, maybe they can again have a look at what the others have done and categorize the things that they like by solution in a form of tables, so that they can see that if in their case the successful design systems are based on specific framework, then it would be something to consider, but only for their case. Like generally, I cannot recommend anything.
Yeah. Always a context specific. But now that we discussed the benchmarking and looking at what others have done well, if now I would be starting my reversive analysis on my own, I would want to like try it out. Are there any particular design systems that you recommend that I include in my data set? Like, what are the design systems I should be looking at? What are design systems you usually look at when you get started? Are there any particular really good examples that everybody should know?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'm trying to be clean in the research and avoid looking at the design systems that I like. This is why I always start my search from some catalog, like component gallery that I mentioned, or some other catalog of the kind, so that I'm not biased and I'm not picking up just from one design system. But I do have a list of design systems that I remember because I often see what they have done. So I can outline Carbon Design System by IBM, then Do It Design System by Lahitapiola, Polaris by Shopify, Aura Design System, probably Orbit.
Yeah, well, that's a good list. That's a good list already, and that was a really good advice of not picking any one of these, or maybe even like a few as your base point, but starting from the big picture, going through the catalog and not having the not building the bias right away into your thinking, because that can be both blessing and a curse. So that's a good advice to be at least mindful of that. But those the five you mentioned are probably really good resources. For me, the Duet and Shopify's Polaris are probably most familiar with, and I think they're both really good pieces of work. Now, if I'm let's imagine that now I'm convinced that I must do the reverse analysis on my design system, or could you also do it in like for a product that you maybe don't have a design system yet? Would that be also? Could you also begin building your own by doing the analysis first? Would that be useful?
That's a great idea. To be honest, I never thought about that, but sounds really applicable, especially if on the inventory phase, they are involving all the stakeholders, like not only developers and designers, but also product managers of different projects, maybe business people, QA. At least it would definitely help to deliver the idea what actually design system is and what we are trying to achieve. And if we are all together with all these people, we would look at the map that we have. We can select specific things that we are going to implement on our side. And this would give them clear and even visual picture of what will be done in near future in the company.
All right, sounds good. Well, one thing that I kind of have to ask about regarding maybe the technology side of design systems and how you go about designing them is the advent of, or that brings a lot of interesting thoughts and thought experiments to mind, is the advent of the artificial intelligence. Have you seen the recent advancements in AI, or like the applications that have come out of it? I mean, the things have been around for a long time, but are there now some tools and services and methods that are AI assisted and you feel like are approaching a level where you could really use them in design system work?
I haven't yet seen any practical example that would be design system specific, but I'm still in the queue to ChatGPT API, and I was thinking that when I get it, maybe the first thing to implement would be a suggestion on how to name a component, because it sounds little, but it's one of the biggest problems in development, naming the things.
Yeah.
That would definitely help.
Yeah, the two hardest problems in software development. that's the naming things and
Yeah,
clearing caches.
exactly.
So
Yeah, exactly. Well, as far as a user, I have noticed that AI tools are the best with writing texts yet. So, and the best, like the obvious thing to apply is writing documentation. So, describing what exactly your thing does, and like in a human readable way.
have you tried the large language models? Do they understand, or are they trained with things like accessible guidelines, or can they answer questions uh, in that domain?
Well, I have tried ChatGPT in the chat mode, so that I give it a quote of some component and ask for 3-sentence description that I could put into my documentation, and it was good enough. But it still needs some human validation yet. So maybe in future versions, we will be able to automate something, but yet it's just like so a bit of help.
Yeah, that they always occurrence they still do, but that's good to hear that it's not total garbage that it's putting out. So if it needs only minor editing, then or corrections, then that's approaching a level where it can really help you in terms of productivity, being able to for example, document the components more thoroughly in a small amount of time. So
Yeah, indeed. Even if it's wrong, it's already some help because you understand on which particular point it is wrong.
yeah. But can you ask? Have you tried asking like accessibility related questions? So does it understand the domain language at all? I'm trying to think of an example. What would be a good question, but yeah, you probably would have to feed the UI to that, so that it would have the context on where to try to answer the question: is this accessible? But one thing that I've
No,
used it
this
for,
I haven't tried.
yeah. So one thing I've used for is harmonizing colors. So you feed it RGB values and ask it to harmonize them, and then you can ask whether they conform to the, I don't know, you probably know the correct term, or what are the contrast guidelines or so forth, so that they are accessible for most people. So that's what I've tried, and for an untrained or not an expert in color theory and accessibility, the results look okay. So when I, for example, compare that to I use this app called Use Contrast. You probably heard of it. You can pick a couple of colors made by Matt Smith, and it does harmonize and unify and adjust the contrast values so that they do fit the guidelines. But I'm not sure if the LLM knows the exact accessibility guidelines. But
Yeah, this I don't know, unfortunately, but that's a really nice idea to ask it about colors. And I'm also thinking about how to apply it to the design work in Figma. Yet I know that there is a plugin that gives you copy, like exemplary texts, so that when designing in Figma, you can apply long enough text to your design, and that speed ups the process quite a lot. The color work can be done similarly.
yeah.
So, yeah,
But aren't every Figma component, is that not a piece of code?
it is. And maybe AI can process it like that, while
Yeah.
human
So
is
so
looking at
maybe
it.
yes. So maybe it could figure out patterns in it, even though it does not understand images. The structure is there. I just don't know how to formulate the question or the instruction to verify that it means those guidelines. But I think the building blocks are already there. We would just have to come up with a method of having it understand the design code or visual as code structure to interpret whether it meets certain guidelines or requirements.
Yeah, I think that design system experience and so-called design system thinking would definitely help with this AI work as well, because what I have noticed, it really likes very specific instructions up to the point. And this is exactly what we are doing on the design system, trying to localize a specific component or even a specific piece of design that we call token. And this way of thinking, when applied to communication with artificial intelligence, it must lead to better results than just normal asking it as a person to do something.
Yeah. Now that we've covered the professional side of your work quite well, the design systems, architecting them, and advising companies on how to build successful design systems. I'm curious to know, what do you do on your free time?
So I'm trying to do gardening, and I am very inexperienced in that. This is first summer I have a garden. So even my parents never had a garden. And that eats all of my time. Yeah, and I never knew that it's such a large project. But apparently, yeah. So all these suggestions are welcomed, even from strangers, because I don't know anything about that, and I still.
So what do you find most challenging about it? Is it what is the most challenging thing about
to
gardening?
understand what to do?
Right.
To understand what to do, what things you have to buy, why. Yeah. So the physical work is like, people can do physical work if they are motivated enough, but to plan everything is very hard. Maybe I have to approach it from systematic level again, to divide it in chunks.
Yeah, well, it is a system after all, so maybe that would
True.
system thinking might help you there. Well, it's been a great conversation so far, and if people want to learn more about whether it's reverse analysis of design systems or about you in general, where do they find you?
Well, I have a personal/professional website, varya.mi, and there are also links to LinkedIn and Twitter from there. And I really like professional communication in that social networks. So everyone who is interested are welcome to connect, even if we are not, even if we haven't met in person. I would accept.
Well, Varya, it's been a pleasure to have a discussion with you, and thanks for joining me on Dialogue.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.